It was a bright, sunny afternoon in Pinewood Park. The birds were singing, the flowers were blooming, and little Sophie Carter was skipping down a dirt path. She was a small girl, just 9 years old, with a big, happy smile on her face. Her ponytail was messy, bouncing as she moved. By her side was her dog, Max. He was a scruffy little thing with floppy ears and a wagging tail. To most people in town, Sophie was just a quiet kid, nothing special. And Max? He looked like any old dog you might see chasing a ball or napping in the sun. But here's a secret no one knew yet: Sophie and Max were not as simple as they looked. Something big was hiding inside them, waiting to come out. The park was a fun place. Kids played on swings, grown-ups walked their dogs, and families had picnics on the grass. Sophie loved coming here with Max. She liked how the sun warmed her face and how the breeze made the trees dance. Max liked it too. He sniffed the ground and wagged his tail, happy to be outside with his best friend. Everything felt perfect until it didn't. Sophie was humming a little song when she heard a loud noise. It was a rumbling sound, like thunder, but it wasn't from the sky. She stopped skipping and looked around. Max stopped too, his ears perking up. That's when she saw them, 3 big, tough bikers riding loud motorcycles. The noise made her tummy feel funny. The bikes roared closer, their wheels kicking up dust. Sophie stood still, her feet stuck to the ground like glue. The bikers rolled right up to her and stopped. Their motorcycles growled as they turned them off. Sophie looked up at them, her eyes wide. These guys were huge. They wore black leather jackets with white skulls on the back. Their boots were heavy, and their faces looked mean. One of them had a scruffy beard. Another had a shiny bald head. The third one chewed on a toothpick, grinning in a way that wasn't nice at all. They blocked the path so Sophie couldn't keep going. She hugged Max closer, feeling his soft fur against her arm. "Hey, you," the biker with the beard shouted. His voice was rough, like he'd been yelling all day. "What's a little kid like you doing out here all alone?" Sophie didn't know what to say. Her throat felt tight, like when you try to swallow something too big. She wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't move. Max stayed quiet, sitting next to her. He didn't bark or growl, just watched the bikers with his big brown eyes. The biker with the bald head laughed. "Look at her," he said. "She's scared stiff." The one with the toothpick nodded. "And what's with that goofy dog? He looks like he couldn't scare a fly." The 3 of them chuckled, their voices loud and mean. Sophie didn't like how they talked about Max. He was her friend, not some silly mutt. But she didn't say anything. She just stood there, holding him tight. Pinewood Park wasn't so fun anymore. The people nearby, grown-ups walking dogs or kids riding bikes, kept their heads down. No one wanted to look at the bikers. They were trouble, and everyone knew it. Sophie could feel her heart beating fast, like a drum in her chest. She didn't know what these guys wanted, but it didn't feel good. The sun was still shining, the birds were still chirping, but everything felt different now. The biker with the beard stepped off his motorcycle. His boots crunched on the dirt as he walked closer. Sophie took a tiny step back, but there wasn't much room to go. "You shouldn't be out here by yourself, kid," he said, his voice low and sneaky. "It's not safe." He smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. It was the kind that makes you feel cold, even on a warm day. His friends stayed on their bikes, watching and grinning. Sophie didn't answer. She didn't know what to do. She wasn't big like them. She wasn't strong or loud. She was just a little girl with a dog. But something inside her told her to stay calm. Max wasn't moving either. He sat there, still as a rock, his tail no longer wagging. His eyes stayed on the bikers, sharp and steady. If you looked close, you might wonder, why wasn't he scared? Most dogs would bark or run away. But not Max. The biker with the beard leaned down a little, his shadow falling over Sophie. "What's your name, kid?" he asked. Sophie didn't want to tell him. She pressed her lips together and shook her head. That made him laugh again. "Oh, a tough one, huh?" he said. "We'll see about that." He looked back at his friends, and they nodded like they had a plan. Sophie didn't know what it was, but she didn't like it one bit. The air felt heavy now, like a storm was coming even though the sky was clear. Sophie's hands were sweaty as she held Max's collar. She could feel his fur under her fingers, soft and warm. It made her feel a tiny bit better, but not much. The bikers were big, and she was small. They were loud, and she was quiet. It didn't seem fair. But life isn't always fair, is it? Sometimes, things happen that you don't expect. And sometimes, the people or dogs you think are weak turn out to be something else entirely. Here's a question for you, friends: have you ever been stuck in a spot where you felt totally helpless? Maybe you were facing something big and scary, and you didn't know what to do. I'm curious, tell me about it in the comments below. I want to know where you're watching from too. Oh, and if you like stories like this, hit that subscribe button so we can hang out more. Sophie and Max have a lot more to show us, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. See, this was just an ordinary day in Pinewood Park, at least, that's what everyone thought. Sophie looked like a regular kid, and Max looked like a regular dog. But looks can trick you. Underneath her messy ponytail and his floppy ears, there was something special waiting to come out. The bikers didn't know it yet, but they were about to find out. And when they did, oh boy, things were going to get wild. Stick around, because the story is just getting started. The leader of the bikers was a big guy with a scruffy beard. His name was Spike, and he looked mean. He leaned forward on his shiny black motorcycle, staring down at little Sophie. "Nice dog, kid," he said with a nasty grin. His voice sounded rough, like he was making fun of her. "Maybe we'll take him for a ride with us." His two buddies laughed loud. They cracked their knuckles, making popping sounds with their hands. It was like they thought they were the bosses of the whole park. Sophie didn't like that. She pulled Max closer to her, wrapping her arms around his scruffy fur. Her voice was small and shaky, but she tried to sound brave. "Leave us alone," she said. She didn't want them to take Max. He was her best friend, not some toy for these mean guys. But Spike didn't care what she said. He wasn't the kind of guy who listened to anyone, especially not a little girl. Spike slid off his bike and stood up tall. He was huge, like a giant compared to Sophie. His boots hit the ground hard as he stepped closer. He towered over her, blocking out the sun with his shadow. "What's a tiny thing like you gonna do about it?" he mocked. His words were sharp, like little pokes to make her feel small. He smirked, showing his yellow teeth. The other bikers moved too. They got off their bikes and started walking around Sophie and Max, making a circle. Their boots stomped the dirt, kicking up little clouds of dust. It felt like they were trapping her. Sophie looked around. The park wasn't so sunny and happy anymore. People were walking by, grown ups with dogs, kids with their parents, but no one stopped to help. They kept their heads down, eyes on the ground. It was like they were scared of the bikers too. Nobody wanted trouble with these tough guys. Their leather jackets with skulls on them made them look dangerous. Sophie could hear her heart beating fast in her chest. Thump, thump, thump. It was so loud she thought Spike might hear it too. But Sophie didn't cry. She didn't want to give Spike the satisfaction of seeing her scared. She just stared up at him, her big eyes locked on his mean face. Her hands gripped Max's collar tight. Her fingers dug into his soft fur, holding on like he was her only safe thing in the world. She didn't know what to do. These guys were big and loud, and she was just a little girl. How could she stop them? And Max? He didn't do what most dogs would do. He didn't bark or growl or show his teeth. He just sat there, right next to Sophie. His floppy ears didn't move, and his tail didn't wag. His big brown eyes stayed on the bikers, watching them like a hawk. He was so calm it was almost weird. Most dogs would be scared or mad if big strangers came too close. But not Max. He looked like he was waiting for something. What was he thinking? It made you wonder, was he really just a regular dog? Spike took another step closer. His boots crunched the dirt loud. He bent down a little, putting his face near Sophie's. She could smell the stinky leather of his jacket and see the dirt on his beard. "You're all alone out here, huh?" he said, his voice sneaky and low. "No mommy or daddy to save you?" His buddies laughed again, like it was the funniest thing ever. The bald biker cracked his knuckles louder. The one with the toothpick spit on the ground, still grinning. They were having fun picking on her. Sophie's tummy felt twisty, like when you're on a roller coaster and it drops fast. She didn't like how close Spike was. She didn't like how his friends kept circling, their boots making thud-thud sounds. It was like they were wolves, and she was a little rabbit caught in the middle. But she didn't run. She didn't scream. She just stood there, holding Max, trying to be brave even though she felt tiny. The air felt heavy now. The sun was still up, but it didn't feel warm anymore. The birds were still singing, but Sophie didn't hear them. All she could hear was Spike's mean laugh and the stomping of boots. People kept walking by, pretending not to see. One lady with a little dog hurried away fast. A man pushing a stroller turned the other way. No one was coming to help. It was just Sophie and Max against these big, scary bikers. Spike straightened up and crossed his arms. "You got nothing to say, kid?" he asked. He sounded like he was daring her to talk back. Sophie didn't answer. She didn't trust her voice, it might shake too much. She just kept looking at him, her hands tight on Max's collar. Max didn't move an inch. His eyes flicked from Spike to the other bikers, watching every step they took. He was so still, like a statue. It was strange, too strange for a normal dog. The bald biker spoke up. "Look at that mutt," he said, pointing at Max. "He's not even scared. What's wrong with him?" The toothpick guy nodded. "Yeah, he's just sitting there. Dumb dog." They laughed again, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was a mean one, like they wanted to make Sophie and Max feel bad. Spike tilted his head, staring at Max. "Maybe he's too stupid to know he should run," he said. His smirk grew bigger. Sophie didn't like them calling Max dumb. He wasn't dumb. He was smart, smarter than they knew. But she didn't say that. She didn't say anything. She just held onto him, feeling his warm fur under her fingers. Her heart kept pounding, but she wouldn't let them see her shake. She wouldn't let them win that way. The tension was growing, like a rubber band pulled tight. Something was going to happen, something big. The bikers thought they were in charge. They thought Sophie was just a weak little kid and Max was just a goofy dog. But they didn't know the whole story. They didn't know what was coming. Max's calm eyes and Sophie's quiet stare were hiding something. What was it? You could feel it in the air, like a secret ready to pop out. Spike cracked his knuckles too, copying his friends. "Let's have some fun," he said, his voice dark and tricky. He took another step, his shadow covering Sophie completely. The other bikers closed in tighter, their circle getting smaller. Sophie's breath got fast, but she didn't back down. Max didn't either. He just watched, waiting, ready. Whatever was going to happen, it was coming soon. And the bikers? They had no idea what they were walking into. The bikers weren't done being mean. Spike, the big guy with the scruffy beard, wasn't going to let a little girl and her dog stop him. He bent down low, his hand reaching out fast to grab Sophie's arm. "Let's see if you're as tough as you look, kid," he said, his voice loud and nasty. His fingers were almost on her sleeve, ready to yank her closer. Sophie's eyes got big, but she didn't move away. She stayed right where she was, holding tight to Max. That's when something changed. Max's floppy ears perked up, standing tall like little flags. He'd been so calm before, just sitting there, but now he looked different. Sophie's lips moved, and she whispered something super quiet. It was just one tiny word so soft that Spike and his buddies didn't even hear it. But Max did. Oh boy, did he hear it? In a snap, he jumped to his feet, fast as lightning. His body got stiff, like a spring ready to bounce. He wasn't a lazy, scruffy dog anymore. He was awake and ready. Spike didn't see it coming. He laughed, a big, mean laugh that shook his belly. "What's this mutt gonna do? Lick me to death," he said, making fun of Max. He thought it was a joke. He lunged forward, his boots stomping hard, trying to grab Sophie again. But Max was way too quick for him. Before Spike could even blink, Max zoomed forward like a rocket. He didn't bark or growl, he just moved. He darted right between Spike's legs, so fast it was like a blur. Spike's big feet got all tangled up, and down he went. Crash! He hit the dirt hard, landing on his butt with a loud thud. Spike yelled some bad words, his face turning red. He wasn't happy at all. His buddies the bald guy and the toothpick guy started laughing like it was the funniest thing ever. "Look at Spike," the bald one shouted, pointing. "Taken down by a little dog." The toothpick guy slapped his knee, giggling like a kid. They thought it was hilarious that their tough leader fell over. But then Max turned around, and their laugh stopped quick. Max's eyes were sharp now, like little lasers. He stared at the other bikers, and they didn't look so funny anymore. His tail wasn't wagging. His ears were up. He stood there, strong and still, watching them. The bald guy gulped. What's with that dog?" he said, his voice getting shaky. The toothpick guy stopped chewing and took a step back. They weren't sure what was happening, but they didn't like it. Max didn't look like a goofy mutt now. He looked different. Sophie didn't move. She stood there like a statue, her messy ponytail blowing a little in the wind. She didn't scream or cry or run away. She just watched, her hands still on Max's collar. Her face was calm, even though her heart was probably going thump 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 inside. Then she spoke again, her voice small but clear. "Max, stay," she said. And just like that, Max froze. He stopped moving, standing tall right in front of her. His paws dug into the dirt, and his eyes stayed on the bikers. It was like he'd been waiting for her to say those exact words. Spike scrambled up from the ground, brushing dirt off his pants. He was mad, really mad. "Stupid dog," he yelled, his face all scrunched up. He kicked at the dirt, sending little rocks flying. "You think that's funny, huh?" He glared at Sophie, then at Max. His buddies weren't laughing anymore. They looked at each other, confused. "How'd that dog move so fast?" the bald guy whispered to the toothpick guy. "I don't know," the other one answered, his toothpick falling to the ground. "He's not normal." Sophie didn't say anything back. She didn't need to. She just stood there, letting Max do his thing. The bikers didn't get it yet, but something big was happening. Max wasn't acting like a regular dog. Regular dogs don't move that fast. Regular dogs don't knock big guys over like that. And regular dogs don't listen to commands like their soldiers. Max was special, and Sophie knew it. But the bikers? They had no clue. Spike rubbed his sore butt and pointed at Max. "I'm gonna get that mutt," he growled. He took a step forward, his boots crunching loud. The other bikers nodded, starting to close in again. They weren't scared yet, not really. They still thought they were the tough ones. They thought Sophie was just a little kid and Max was just a silly dog. But they were wrong. Every second that passed, they were getting closer to finding out the truth. And it wasn't going to be good for them. Max's ears twitched a little, like he was listening to everything. His eyes followed Spike, then flicked to the other two. He didn't miss a thing. Sophie's hand stayed on his collar, but she wasn't scared anymore. She looked ready. Ready for what? That's what made you wonder. What did she know that the bikers didn't? What was Max going to do next? The air felt buzzy, like something huge was about to happen. The people in the park were still keeping their heads down. No one came closer. A lady with a stroller hurried away. A man with a big dog pulled it down another path. They didn't want to get mixed up with the bikers. But if they'd looked closer, they might have seen something amazing starting to unfold. Sophie and Max weren't backing down. They were standing up, even though they looked small. Spike cracked his knuckles again, trying to look tough. "You're in trouble now, kid," he said, his voice low and mean. He didn't like being laughed at. He didn't like falling down. And he really didn't like that Max wasn't scared of him. His buddies nodded, stepping closer too. The circle around Sophie and Max got tighter. The bikers thought they were winning. They thought they could do whatever they wanted. But they didn't see what was coming. Max's quick move wasn't just luck. Sophie's quiet word wasn't just a guess. There was something bigger going on, something the bikers couldn't handle. Every little thing Max did was a hint. Every calm look from Sophie was a clue. They weren't weak. They weren't helpless. They were waiting. And the bikers? They were walking right into a trap they didn't even know was there. What was Max really capable of? Why was Sophie so sure of herself? The answers were close, super close. The bikers had no idea they just made a big mistake. They thought they were the hunters, but maybe they were the ones being hunted. Stick around, because this was about to get wild. Spike was mad, really, really mad. He jumped up from the dirt, his face all red and sweaty. He brushed off his jacket, growling like an angry bear. "That's it," he shouted, loud enough to make the birds fly away. He reached into his leather jacket and pulled out a shiny metal chain. It dangled from his hand, clinking as he shook it. "I'm done with this kid and her stupid dog," he yelled. His eyes were wild, and he looked ready to cause big trouble. He swung the chain hard, aiming right at Sophie. The metal flashed in the sunlight, whipping through the air fast. Sophie didn't even flinch. She stood there, small but steady, her messy ponytail blowing a little in the breeze. The chain was so close it looked like it would hit her for sure. But then, Max moved. Oh boy, did he move. Before the chain could touch Sophie, Max leaped up like a superhero. In one smooth jump, he opened his mouth and caught the chain right in his teeth. Chomp. He yanked it hard, pulling it clean out of Spike's hand. Spike froze. His mouth dropped open, and his eyes got big. The chain fell to the ground with a loud clank, and Max stood over it, letting out a deep, rumbling growl. It wasn't a little yip or a bark, it was a big, scary sound that made your tummy shake. Spike just stood there, staring. He didn't know what to say. His buddies, the bald guy and the toothpick guy, stopped laughing too. They looked at Max, then at each other, like they couldn't believe what they saw. Sophie took a step forward. Her sneakers crunched on the dirt, but her face was calm. She didn't look scared anymore. She looked strong. "Max, protect," she said. Her voice was steady, not shaky at all. Just 2 little words, but those 2 words changed everything. The second she said them, Max turned into a tornado. He launched himself at Spike, fast as a bullet. His paws hit Spike's chest like hammers, and down Spike went bam, flat on his back in the dirt again. Max pinned him there, standing on him with paws that felt like steel. Spike couldn't move. He squirmed and yelled, but Max was too strong. The other bikers didn't know what to do. "Get that dog off him," the bald guy shouted. They ran forward, their boots stomping, trying to help Spike. But Max was ready. He was like a blur, moving so fast you could hardly see him. He dodged the bald guy's big hands, weaving around like he was dancing. The toothpick guy tried to grab him too, but Max snapped his teeth, not biting, just warning, and the guy jumped back fast. Max was everywhere at once, spinning and dodging and growling. He wasn't just a dog anymore. He was a machine, a super tough, super smart machine. Spike was still on the ground, yelling bad words and trying to push Max off. "Get off me, you mutt," he screamed. But Max didn't budge. His paws pressed down hard, and his eyes stayed locked on Spike's face. The bikers stopped running around. They stood there, breathing hard, looking at Max like he was a monster. "What is this dog?" the bald guy whispered. The toothpick guy shook his head. "He's not normal. No way." That's when it clicked. The bikers finally got it. This wasn't just a regular dog. Max wasn't some scruffy pet who chased balls and ate treats. He was a K9, a special dog trained by the police to catch bad guys. His floppy ears and wagging tail were just a trick. Underneath all that, he was a hero, a protector who knew exactly what to do. And Sophie? She wasn't just some helpless kid. She was the daughter of Officer Jake Carter, a tough cop who worked at the police station. He'd taught her how to stay calm and how to tell Max what to do. The bikers had picked the wrong kid to mess with. Sophie stood there, arms crossed, watching Max hold Spike down. She didn't smile or laugh. She just looked at the bikers like she'd known this would happen all along. The bald guy dropped his hands to his sides. "Wait, AK-9, he said, his voice small. The toothpick guy nodded slow. "And she's a cop's kid? Oh man, we're in trouble." Spike stopped squirming. He looked up at Max, then at Sophie, and his red face turned pale. He knew he'd made a big mistake. Max growled again, low and rumbly, keeping Spike stuck. The bikers didn't dare move closer. They were tough guys with big bikes and scary jackets, but right now, they looked like scaredy cats. All their mean laughs and big talk were gone. They thought they could bully a little girl and her dog, but they were so wrong. Sophie and Max were a super strong team, and the bikers never saw it coming. The park was quiet now. The people who'd been walking by stopped to watch. A lady with a stroller peeked over. A man with a dog let his leash go loose. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. A little girl and her scruffy pup had turned the tables on three big, tough bikers. It was like something out of a movie, but it was real, super real. Sophie didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. Max was doing all the work, and she was in charge. Her quiet words, Max, protect, had unleashed something amazing. The bikers thought they were the bosses, but they weren't. They thought Sophie was weak, but she wasn't. They thought Max was a joke, but he was the toughest one there. The big reveal was out. Sophie and Max were a secret weapon, and the bikers had walked right into their trap. Spike's chain lay in the dirt, useless now. His tough guy act was over. The bald guy and the toothpick guy stood back, hands up like they didn't want any more trouble. Max stayed on Spike, his growl a warning to everyone. The truth was clear as day. These bikers had no idea who they were messing with, and now they were finding out the hard way. Sophie wasn't just a kid. Max wasn't just a dog. Together, they were unstoppable. And this fight? It was over before the bikers even knew it started. Just a few minutes after Max pinned Spike down, a loud sound filled the air. Wee-oh-oh, wee-oh-oh. It was police sirens, getting closer fast. Red and blue lights flashed as police cars zoomed into Pinewood Park. Tires screeched as they stopped, and cops jumped out, holding shiny handcuffs. They were ready to catch the bad guys. Sophie stood there, arms crossed, watching it all. Max stayed close, his ears up, making sure the bikers didn't try anything sneaky. Spike and his buddies panicked. Run! Spike yelled, trying to scramble away. The bald guy and the toothpick guy took off too, their boots pounding the dirt. But Max wasn't going to let them escape. He moved like a shadow, fast and quiet. He darted in front of Spike, then zipped around to block the bald guy. He herded them like sheep, pushing them right toward the cops. The bikers didn't stand a chance. Max was too smart, too quick. The police grabbed them fast. One cop snapped handcuffs on Spike's wrists. Click, click. Another cop caught the bald guy, and a third got the toothpick guy. You're coming with us, the cops said, their voices firm. They shoved the bikers into the back of a squad car, one by one. Spike banged on the window, his face all mad, but it didn't matter. Their tough guy act was gone. They weren't scary anymore, just caught. Sophie didn't move. She stood there with her arms crossed, looking proud. Max sat next to her, his tail wagging just a little now. The crowd in the park started to cheer. People clapped their hands and shouted, "Way to go!" A lady with a stroller smiled big. A man with a dog whistled loud. They couldn't believe what they saw. A little girl and her scruffy dog had stopped three big, mean bikers. It was amazing. Then a tall cop walked over to Sophie. He had a shiny badge on his shirt that said Carter. He grinned wide and ruffled Sophie's messy hair with his hand. "Good job, kiddo," he said, his voice warm and happy. "You and Max make quite a team." Sophie looked up at him and smiled a little. That cop was her dad, Officer Jake Carter. He was so proud of her and Max too. The bikers glared out the car windows, their faces grumpy and sour. They didn't like losing, especially to a kid and a dog. But they couldn't do anything about it now. The cops slammed the car doors shut, bang, and the sirens started again. The police drove off, taking Spike and his crew away. Justice was served. The bad guys got what they deserved, all because Sophie and Max stood up to them. The park felt happy again. The sun shone bright, and the crowd kept clapping. Sophie gave Max a big hug, burying her face in his fur. "You're the best, Max," she whispered. He licked her cheek, wagging his tail harder. They were heroes, small but mighty, and everyone knew it now. The bikers learned a big lesson: don't mess with Sophie and her canine dog. The sun was going down over Pinewood Park, painting the sky with orange and pink. Sophie and Max walked home together, side by side. Sophie's sneakers crunched on the path, and Max's tail wagged a little as he trotted along. They looked like just a girl and her dog again, small, quiet, and simple. But now, everyone in the park knew the truth. They weren't just ordinary. They were special. The smallest kid and the scruffiest pup had turned out to be the toughest of all. It's funny how looks can trick you. Sophie seemed like a shy little girl with a messy ponytail. Max looked like a goofy dog with floppy ears. No one thought they could do anything big. But they did. They stopped 3 mean bikers all by themselves. Spike and his buddies learned that the hard way. They thought they could pick on someone weak, but they were so wrong. Sophie and Max had strength inside them, strength you couldn't see until it came out. So here's something to think about, friends. Don't judge people or dogs by what you see on the outside. A person might look small or quiet, but they could be super brave. A dog might look silly or scruffy, but he could be a hero. The real strength isn't in big muscles or loud voices. It's hiding deep down, where you least expect it. Sophie and Max showed us that. They didn't need to be big or loud to win. They just needed to be smart and strong in their own way. Have you ever met someone who surprised you like that? Maybe a friend who seemed shy but did something amazing? Or a pet who turned out to be braver than you thought? I bet you have a story. Tell me about it in the comments below, I really want to hear. It's so cool how people and animals can hide their power until the right moment comes. Just like Sophie and Max, they wait, and then bam, they shine. As Sophie and Max disappeared down the path, the park got quiet again. The sun dipped lower, and the stars started to peek out. Everyone who saw what happened that day went home with a smile. They'd seen something awesome, a little girl and her dog beating the odds. It's the kind of thing that makes you feel good inside. It makes you think, wow, maybe I can be strong too. And you can. You don't have to be the biggest or the loudest. You just have to be you, and that's enough. So next time you see someone who looks small or simple, don't count them out. They might have a big surprise waiting. And next time you feel small yourself, remember Sophie and Max. They didn't give up, and they won. You can too. Let me know what you think, drop your thoughts below. I'll see you in the next story, friends. Keep being awesome, because you never know when your strength will show up and save the day.